My name is Brittany. I'm 26 years old and I've been living with HIV for 6 years. I decided to come today to help raise awareness about HIV. I got HIV by having unprotected sex. I was a crack cocaine addict. I was doing survival sex work to provide for myself and my addiction. I met a guy he was selling drugs, and we became partners and dating and that kind of thing. And he wasn't faithful. He was cheating on me with multiple other sex trade workers. But I did trust him. I expected to be, him upfront with his status and that kind of thing, and he wasn't. I guess being in survival sex work, you think, oh, it's the person you're having sex with for money that's going to get it, and I was always using protection with those people, but the person that was supposed to be that clean person wasn't, and at the time I wasn't really taking opportunities to get us tested and that kind of thing. I was an addict, so my main addiction was drugs, and kind of taking care of myself was second.
I mean, life happens and you can never go back. You can only move forward. But that history of how you became HIV infected, perhaps you at some point were working in sex trade in order to survive, to have food. It may be to have supported a drug habit at some point in time. And you've changed that. But that particular reason you got infected still remains, because the HIV diagnosis is still there. It's something you can't get by. It's always there. It's a constant reminder.
I had asked numerous times to use protection, but the relationship wasn't the best. It was kind of physically abusive. So he didn't want to use them, and I didn't want to lose him. So I guess at the same time I was taking risks myself. But you would imagine that your partner would be upfront and honest with you, especially when they're having sex with multiple people that are all high risk, right? Most people would think that being in a monogamous relationship means that you're not at risk, but unless you can say for 100% fact that your partner is being monogamous, then you never really know. So it's just best to get tested and pick and choose who your partners are wisely.
What about the woman who's in a monogamous relationship?
Are you? Are you in a monogamous relationship? And I think that what we know today, based on the statistics, is there are more men who are having bisexual relationships than we previously may have thought, which means that even though you are in a monogamous relationship, from your perspective, your partner may not be. And often that information is not disclosed. And women often are unknowingly infected by their male partners. And those are moments where I think it's a little harder to protect yourself, because making choices around using condom use opens up a whole nother bunch of questions. So all of a sudden your partner starts using condoms and you're like, what's that about? So you may get good information, but on the other hand, if they don't, you feel you're in a monogamous relationship, you may not choose or want to be using condoms. And I think that that's a really big challenge, and I'm not quite sure how we're going to solve that problem anytime soon, because it's really perception, and relationships are, for the most part, built on some form of trust.
HIV doesn't discriminate, so there's no way to really tell if someone has HIV. It's about talking to your partner and getting tested together and asking questions. Yes, I think it's important for testing during relationships, if you're ending a relationship or if you're beginning a new relationship. And that way you can kind of keep track. If you do happen to be infected with the virus, you have an idea of how long you've been infected with the virus, which is key in future care.
But ultimately, everyone should be tested once a year at a minimum during time when they're sexually active and or they're drug using. The things that women can do to protect themselves against HIV. would be to use condoms or barrier precautions during any sexual activities. I think right there the problem, of course, is that women are not always empowered to do that. There are female condoms available, which makes it a little bit easier for women to make choice proactively, and I think that that's a great thing. The downside is they are expensive and they're a little bit sloppy, but I certainly do for some of my teens. I like to talk to them about the ability to put those female condoms inside, insert them. You can wear them for up to 8 hours, and so I mean you can pre-plan around the potential for an exposure, if you will. And I think that's I think that's great, because these are the moments when women can start to take responsibility for their own bodies and not depend on their partners to do the right thing, if you will.
My advocacy is that you're not, just because you have HIV, your life isn't over, and that HIV positive women can and do have healthy babies. A few months after I had broken up with this person, I found out I was expecting in September of 2005. In March of 2006, at 36 weeks pregnant, I was diagnosed with HIV. Alexis was born at 38 weeks and at Mount Sinai High Risk Hospital, because I wasn't tested early in pregnancy, so I had to have an emergency C-section, and she was followed up by Sick Kids Hospital, and she's HIV negative. Yeah.
Women who are HIV positive, who are engaged in care, do not transmit to their babies. And the statistics are very clear. In Ontario, when a woman is aware of their HIV status, engaged in care, those babies do not have HIV. The only children born today who have HIV are women who did not know their diagnosis, or we're perhaps not undetectable or not on medications quickly enough for whatever reason. Generally unaware of their status is really the one reason. Or perhaps we're breastfeeding a child. And the second piece is, how do we get pregnant? You know, how do we safely do that? That spoke about treatment being part of prevention. So that means that people who are on treatment are less likely to transmit virus than people who have high viral loads. And that really makes sense. I mean, but we now have the science that we sort of intuited for a number of years that may be true. If a couple chose to have a child or conceive a child, if they just choose to do that in the normal way, then there is less risk for the individual who's not HIV positive if the woman's on treatment. So that's a celebration. That removes some of the guilt. There's also the old turkey baster approach, which is simply not going to a fertility clinic, but rather just taking a sample of semen and inserting it directly inside the woman, and that can be done coupled or not. You can make it interesting if you want, and that can work for a lot of people, particularly if there's a tension around possibilities of transmission.
But I've since went on to have 2 more babies, and I was able to have a natural birth, which is a really big thing for me, because for me it's like a sign of being a woman, right? And for going through my pregnancy with Alexis, I was looking forward to that. I wasn't aware of the HIV. I had this ideal birthing plan, and it was like, no, none of that can happen. You can't breastfeed, you can't give birth naturally, you know. Whereas once I was aware of my HIV status, I was, once I found out I was pregnant, I was able to get meds at a proper time that enabled me to have a natural birth, and that was a big thing for me. Like artificial insemination or sperm washing, if it's a male partner, that's positive. Yeah, so HIV positive women can have babies, and I got pregnant the natural way. My partner was aware of my HIV status. We spoke with infectious diseases specialists, and we just decided that although it is risky and not suggested, that we would have our babies a natural way, but there is options like artificial insemination or sperm washing if it's a male partner that's positive.
We are all empowered by knowledge. Anyone who makes those blanket statements that said HIV positive women should not be having children is saying that based on their own preconceived notions, biases, stigma and discrimination are playing into those comments. There is no reason why HIV positive women should not be having children.